my friends, again, let me say welcome to another episode on the SosoBone Media Network. This afternoon, my guest is none other than Dr. Claire Nelson, founder and president of the Institute of Caribbean Studies. Dr. Nelson, let me say welcome to the SosoBone Media Network.
Welcome. Thank you so much. I am indeed welcome, and thank you for having me.
Okay. Now, you know, I have known Dr. Nelson for quite a while, and we're going to get into some of those details as we go forward over the next couple of weeks. But today I will tell you this. Dr. Nelson is one of those persons who has opened up more categories for people to be engaged with the Caribbean community than has ever been done before. And I say this without any apology, because while we recognize so many persons who have gone before us, who have done exemplary things for our Caribbean community, we normally can point to singular projects that they were focused on. Dr. Nelson has broken the glass ceiling on so many areas that it needs in-depth analysis and recording for our future. So Dr. Nelson, let me say again, welcome to the SosoBone Media Network.
Thank you.
Now, Dr. Nelson, where in Jamaica are you from? Because I know you're born Yardi. Where in Jamaica did you go to school? And what are your most pleasant memories of our island, Jamaica, while you're so committed, as some people say, to the island?
Well, so that question has not been asked of me in a very long time.
Okay.
So I was like, whoa, where's this interview going? All right, you're taking me back there. So I grew up in a bedroom community called Harborview.
Okay.
If you are not from Kingston, but you fly into Kingston, that first community that you come up to after you go on that long, narrow strip, that's Harborview. It was one of the first housing schemes built for, I would say, affordable housing at the time. Affordable meaning for people of civil service. The people who moved into Harborview back in those days were mostly teachers, nurses, and police officers. Because we were one of the first people on the street. We moved in before independence.
Okay.
So sometime in 1962, and I said because I have a vague memory of myself in 1962. I said vague mean very vague. When I was older, I asked my mother to tell me if I really did experience it, and she said, yes, I did experience it. So I remember Independence Day very vaguely.
Really?
We moved in 1962. It was just built. And I went to, I think it was Aloysius Primary School. One was like pre-kindergarten. Then I went to Harborview. So my elementary school was Harborview Primary School.
Okay.
So my mother was a teacher, so that was a very awful time. The most of that era was like, I hated that. I hated that like poison, not poison. Poison. P-I-Z-E-N-A.
Tell me about it.
And then I went to the lovely St. Jude's High School for Girls.
Okay.
And I had a fantastic time.
Okay.
Free from the tyranny of my mother's watchful eye and presence. And I could get out bad and broke out.
Okay.
And so I went to St. Jude's High School for Girls. And I like to say with deep pride that I'm a product of St. Jude's High School for Girls. I really am. Okay.
Now, next thing I'm going to ask you, since we have so many churches in Jamaica, we have more churches than stoplights, I understand. What church did you attend in Jamaica?
So I went to the Harborview Moravian Church, where I was the bane of my Sunday school teacher's existence. I asked many questions that could not be answered. They didn't really throw me out of Sunday school class. I did pass communion class and got to take communion. But it was very shaky, touch and go for a while. And let me just say up front, that is why today I'm an interfaith ordained minister, right?
Okay.
Interfaith. Get it? And I am who I am because at 10 years old, 11 years old, I had deep doubts that a God I could love is so wicked as to throw everybody else in hell who did not call on the name of Jesus Christ. I know right now, don't blaspheme. Some people going to stop watch the show after this. The man is a demon worshiper. But I am a worshiper of the one true God of all humanity and this planet and the galaxy, which continues to ever expand.
Okay, so being an ordained minister was more about therapy, right?
No, somebody told my cousin I was a demon worshiper. Lord have mercy.
Okay. All right, let's move along. Let's move along. So okay. So having conquered St. Hughes, what was your next move?
Well, I have St. Hughes conquered me, or I conquered St. Hughes, but certainly St. Hughes, I think, allowed me to have independent thought.
Okay.
And I didn't realize then how important that was until when I got older and Maca joked me. And I had to dig deep for roots on which to cling.
Okay.
I heard myself say, do they know who they're talking to? I'm a St. Jude High School Latin girl. And that was the day I realized how important St. Jude's was. At the time, I didn't know that. I was just like, oh, I'm at high school, whatever. But that's what. Then I went to University of the West Indies on a campus for 1 year.
Okay.
Where I lived on campus in Irving Hall.
Okay.
And my claim to infamy there, I got into theater, my first love.
Okay.
I went there to study pre-engineering, but you know it is. I had told my mother I wanted to study theater, but she run me and to go back and come back again.
As a teacher, she gonna run you.
She run me, man. Theater. Just go back to your room and come up with something intelligent here about theater. Theater? You can leave out theater money. Eh? So I became an engineer. But on campus, my claim to infamy is one of the few girls in the pre-engineering program.
Okay.
Was theater. So I ended up being in 3 plays on campus, and that's how I became like slightly infamous there as well.
Well, like the typical Jamaican, you were preparing for 3 jobs at the same time.
Yeah, man. Listen to me. Listen, when I was going to primary school, and high school, my mother's famous words were, the devil find work for idle hands. So I couldn't be idle. Are you kidding? First of all, you can't lay down and lie down in the middle of the day. No sleeping in the daytime in Mrs. Nelson's house. That could not happen, not at all. Then you have 2 days is piano lesson.
Okay.
Then you have dance lessons. Then you had Girl Scouts.
Okay.
Then you had what do you call it? Church youth fellowship and choir practice. That take you every 7 days a week. Okay.
So when
every evening I have to go somewhere.
So when did you get away from this abuse of your free time?
Well, I didn't get it because even in high school, when I went to UWI, I never knew free time because I got into theater, so I had no free time. Okay. Because no, I already was groomed into not having free time. Okay. So for me, I really believe the devil find work for idle hands. So I don't like to be idle. I have to be doing something. It's like it's inbred. At UWI, I ended up in 3 places. When I went to university in America, I ended up in the forming the Caribbean Student Association. At one point in the University of Buffalo, I had started a dance group. Myself, another young lady from Trinidad, taught that most of the kids at the university had grown up in New York, so they didn't really know their heritage. So myself and Marcel, for some Trinidad, we taught them the folk songs. So we had a little folk singing group of Caribbean folk songs. So I taught the dances, she taught dance to folk songs. Okay. 1 year I remember, I said, I don't know what I was. I actually tie-dyed the costume, made the costume, choreographed the dance, cooked the food. And like, I didn't go to school for about 2 weeks. I was busy planning the Caribbean weekend on campus. That's all to say, I really believe the devil find work for idle hands. So I didn't know how to be idle.
Okay, and that was all while you were in Jamaica.
No, in college in the US.
Oh, okay. So you were doing all these cultural things in the US now.
At University of Buffalo. I spent 1 year in Jamaica where I did
Okay.
only theater.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to the US, you can't do theater. There's nobody on campus who will understand Jamaican at all. So I was forced to do dance.
Mm-hmm.
So all the little dances I did in Miss Alma Muckin's dance studio,
Mm-hmm.
I turned, and obviously also just what you learn from Girl Scout and all those things. I then taught my peers who grew up in New York Caribbean folk dance
Okay.
and Caribbean folk songs. So I knew a whole repertoire of folk songs.
Okay.
So I became a folklorist, if you will. But I got practice from Girl Scouts. What would happen in Jamaica when I was a child, I stuttered very badly. So I'm going to start with that. I stuttered extremely badly. But when I was on stage, I didn't stutter.
Okay.
So I started performing very young. In a Girl Scout, we would have skits. So we'd do like dark shadows. We would do all these skits, and then I would make a fool of myself. When I was making a fool of myself on stage, I didn't stutter. So it was fun for me to get out of myself to be somebody else on stage so I wouldn't stutter.
And those days, we never know anything about split personality, you know.
Exactly. I probably had a split personalities, but I didn't know that then. But now I know, right? I probably had a split personality. Yeah. It was like, but it's not too surprising, really, because probably I don't remember so much of my childhood because maybe the memories in one personality were not good, so I don't remember those memories. I remember. Hey, it's what it is.
So you see, okay, so this, my friends, is what has produced the Dr. Nelson that we now enjoy. Okay.
Yes.
So now they will understand, you know, and they're able to appreciate you in all the different places.
You're probably right. They're probably the split personality because I mean, if you grew up feeling as if to say if you're idle, something is wrong with you. You just don't know how to not do anything.
Yes, 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 yes. So after you left Buffalo now, where did your footprints now end up next?
Purdue University for my engineering master's. So I did engineering, industrial engineering at Buffalo. I was the only woman in all my classes, only black female, I should say, not woman. Only black female in all my classes. Only black female in my graduating class. I went to Purdue as the only black female in all my classes. And again in engineering school in the Midwest in Indiana in 1979. There I go with my hair in tiny braids with little shells and fishbone and all kind of things.
But before you jump along to the fishbone and the fish head, this engineering application that you embraced, I mean, was there anyone from my recollection from our country as a woman who had ever done an engineering?
I didn't know any. I personally didn't know any women engineers. I didn't know any women engineers, and that's what attracted me to it.
Okay.
I knew I got bored very easily. I knew about myself that I got bored very easily. I wanted to find a career that was going to be, I thought, interesting and would give an opportunity to work on many different things.
Okay.
And industrial engineering attracted me at the time because I had political ambitions.
Okay. Okay.
So at 16, you know, I thought I'd get into politics. I thought I was, because again, St. Jude's High School, we're a very political high school. We're taught to think, we're taught to question authority. My mother also grew up questioning authority. So I always was never a follower of what is just to be in fashion, right? That's just not my personality. And so I thought that I would go home and get into politics and probably become the first female prime minister of Jamaica.
Which one of your personality was that? Because our culture does not encourage women to do it, to be anything but teachers, from where you're coming from at that time, nurses, teachers, and what was the next one that we all our brilliant women ended up? Not in politics.
I don't know where that personality came from because, quite frankly, you have to imagine me thinking these things when I was a stutterer. So I don't know how that came into my head.
Well,
But somehow I thought I was going to be able to speak to people,
mhm,
and I was going to become Minister of Industry and Planning, because
okay.
I always was like, these people just don't know how to be organized and efficient. When
Mm,
I discovered there's such an engineering degree that actually taught people how to be efficient and effective, I was like, that's on me.
uh-huh.
I'm going to teach Jamaica how to be efficient, and then I was going to do so well that they would
Okay.
have. So, as a child, you just daydream. It's just a daydream. I never pursued it ever, but, it was a good daydream to have.
Okay. Okay. So having done your master's at Purdue, where did your footsteps now take you from at that point forward?
I then went to work at the Inter-American Bank in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
as a young professional. So I was the first Black woman engineer at the IDB.
Okay. Now, how did they accept you breaking that glass ceiling now?
It was not a very pleasant experience. I was not accepted. The organization was very hostile to people like myself.
Wow.
Just imagine Latin America back in those days. Um, and that's why I'm a White House champion and change actually. But back
Okay.
in those days, Black women that looked like me in Latin America were normally cleaning ladies
Yeah.
or, ladies of the night.
Mm-hmm.
And furthermore, my color was not a good color. I didn't pass the brown paper bag test. So I wasn't quite black enough to be considered black, as a Brazilian told me. You're not black. You are morena. All right, fine. Um, because he really liked me a lot and did not want me to think of myself as being black. It'd be too terrible if I was black.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the institution really didn't know what to do with me. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I first of all, I had an engineering degree from Purdue. I was a Alpha Pi Mu scholar, so I'm honors degree, Tau Beta Pi, always in the top 5 of my class. But what do you do with a Black woman engineer? It just didn't fit.
And you were not ironing your straightening your hair.
Pardon me?
You were not straightening your hair.
And I hear exactly. So I was not, but at the time I didn't know. I just knew that I was there. I went there because I thought that I was going to live out my dream of
Mm.
doing development. I really I love development. I love the idea of being able to help shape countries around the world, move them from zero to whatever in whatever field. I thought I'd be able to support the industrial development. I really believed that I could make a difference in that field. I did make a difference, but not necessarily in that field.
Okay. Now, having therefore established and I would say overcome, all the trials and tribulations at the IADB, IWDB, or whichever we want acronym it goes by now. What was your next step? Because I mean, at least
That's it. I kind of stayed there all the time. But I did, however, when I got there and moved to DC, I first started a dance group.
okay,
Started the Muja Carib Dancers. That was the first thing I did. Within 6 months, I started a dance
okay.
group.
Mm-hmm.
Because I love dancing very much. And then I also decided to support another group, which was a drama group,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the Caribbean Heritage Group. So I
Uh-huh.
ended up being the artistic director of both the drama group and the dance group, which was fantastic because I got to combine and do some fabulous concerts. We did the first ever Caribbean cultural event at IDB
Okay,
in 1982. When
okay,
Jamaica turned 20, I had my first ever event at IDB. The executive director for the Caribbean at the time, Mr. Gift, supported it. I got my dance group, my drama group. We had a beautiful concert, lunch hour concert. It was magnificent. It was really great. And because DC had so many more Caribbean people, I found people, like-minded people who could be part of that process. So we had singing Jamaican and other Caribbean folk songs.
mm-hmm.
So we had dances we choreographed with different, like we had what they call the market scene, we had the revival scene, we had the street scene dances, we had the ballet scene from Trinidad. We really had a whole slew of, let's say, artistic. So Muja Carib meant gestures of the Caribbean. Muja is a Sanskrit word. And that group became very popular all over Washington. We performed Kennedy Center, World Bank, every street festival. all over the place. We performed a lot across, Washington area.
And let me get this straight. All of this was community service, not paid.
No, volunteer work. I mean, I have to pay to make the costume. Half the time we weren't paid. If we were lucky, we got paid $50, $75. But I was the only person in the group who was working. So I ended up having to many times fund the costumes and all those things. So that was all mostly, my giving back through something I enjoyed.
Okay.
And then subsequently I started my doctorate, but I was still doing my theater. So I would do crazy stuff like go to school and have rehearsal, school rehearsal, school rehearsal, school rehearsal. I mean, study. So again, the devil find works for idle hands. I was in a situation where the bank wasn't really challenging me anyway, so my brain had a lot of ample time. So I wrote many plays in that time. I wrote I wrote a play called The Downing Street Affair, or Number 10 Downing Street, which actually won a silver medal in the Jamaica Festival, Literary Festival.
Wow.
That was a pantomime style. We performed it here in Washington, D.C. as a pantomime. I co-wrote another pantomime style with another professor from Howard, from Barbados, called I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas. It was again a folk tale kind of thing with, love interest, real kind of a real pantomime type vibe with singing and dancing and stuff. We rented a theater, we rented a school and performed it for the community. Those were the days. I mean, I was having a fantastic time.
Okay.
I also wrote a play that went on to be a big hit in Jamaica, Resident Alien.
Wow.
And that ran for 3 months in Jamaica, and it was a big commercial hit in Jamaica. I didn't produce it, I just sent the script down. There was another play that won the Best Director Award. It was a very serious play. It was called Rivers of Blood. That was the story of women in crisis of post-war and conflict regions. That was a more documentary drama type piece, still made up, but from news accounts, fictionalized news accounts. And that won a director's award in the DC New Play Festival. Okay. So so when I say I'm a award-winning playwright, I'm not making it up. I'm not, because I don't only do that. I don't really push that part of my life too much, but that's why I still perform. And I still do folklore, and I still do one-woman shows. I have 3 one-woman shows I do now. One is Limber Like This, about Caribbean life in America. One is Moon Runnings, the life and times of the first Jamaican on the moon, that's set in the future. And the other one is called Red Sky Falling, which is like, this is how the world ends. And it's a story about how the world could end.
Well, I have lost count of how many jobs you have at this time. So I just okay, people like you, why people end up calling people lazy.
No, what's funny though, when my play ran in Jamaica, the one that was a big commercial hit, right? Because the other that I just did here in DC as a side project. But Resident Alien was running for 3 months. First, my mother took all her friends, right? And they heard about it. Oh, is that Duncan? But I was Mrs. Nelson's daughter. I never have no title. It's Mrs. Nelson's daughter. I said, Mrs. Nelson's daughter at that play. Oh my God, we have to go. So they go. So my mother was very proud to tell me, see, you have to go to school to study theater.
Hold on. So the play wasn't theater.
She felt vindicated because I didn't have to go to school
just on the theater.
Because I still end up being successful in theater without studying it. But thank God, because I had a real job, I could put food on the table.
You could spend time writing theater.
So she really rubbed it in at that point, that she was right.
So was that the time now when you decided you had to form a non-profit to take over all your expenses?
Oh no, actually no. What had happened was why we stopped the dance group was we were probably like about 10 or 15 years into it. And we had performed at this street festival. By this time, of course, we're older and fatter. And we were huffing and puffing our way off the stage. And one of the Caribbean gentlemen, whose name I will not call, said, you all girls still at it. You all girls still at it,
You're not chicken anymore. You're not chicken anymore.
I can say from the accent, you can tell, right? Oh gosh. Oh gosh, you all girls still at it, eh? So we look at each other, and I think, but they never say anything. I was like, okay, maybe it's time to hang up. But also it was the era when Ronald Reagan, that era was very much about the Contra, and the pundits were talking about, you know, the Caribbean going communist and all of those things. I really was like just fed up of all these people speaking on behalf of us. And by the time I was into, you know, as a young professional, we're into doing like business in the Caribbean, events at the restaurants and networking. You thought you'd arrive, you know, you thought you could change the world. And so myself and a couple of the young guys hung out with, we'd always be doing these events. And we'd also always try to work with older people. And then most times they would tell us no. And so one time, one of the guys said, girl, you know, these old people, I think we better start our own organization. You're the president, I'll be the vice president. I said, okay. That was it, literally. That was it.
Okay. Now, was the focus at what point in your general understanding that you were going to be an activist or an advocate?
It was always going to be an advocate, because we knew full well that even the meetings we used to have before we formed officially were always about, I always was concerned about bringing the diaspora to the table. I knew that ministers would come to town for the World Bank meetings, the IDB meetings. They'd come to town for like side meetings. We'd have a prime minister come through the bank to have a meeting. I knew when they were going to be here long before the rest of people. The embassies knew and I knew, because we have to prepare briefing books and those things for the people so that present it to the ministers. So I would then tell my friends, hey, let's have a side event. So we'd have a side event where we'd say, okay, for these Black business people who want to do business in the Caribbean could network. So that's how the whole thing started. We want to provide a space for Black-owned businesses to network, for Caribbean-owned business to network with these people. And we recognize that the think tanks in Washington at the time didn't include people like us. So we had to encourage our own space. It was a matter of saying, you're not invited to the table, create your own space. So iState was always set up to do what it's doing. It was always set up to be a space for diaspora engagement and development, and diaspora in its broadest context. Caribbean diaspora and African Americans and others who wanted to do business in the Caribbean and support the Caribbean in any way. That was why we were founded in 1993.
Good, and I'm glad you're able to clarify that, because I don't want people to think along the other side or to question the foundation of the Institute of Caribbean Studies, that even as we talk about the past and the present, we still have you in a position now where they regard you as a futurist, which is where the Institute of Caribbean Studies is going to take the Caribbean, African community. So I'm happy that, you know, we are able to clarify that part.
Oh, yes. I mean, we were all in our 30s mostly. As I said, young professionals working in either IMF, World Bank, IDB, USAID, that kind of a milieu, right? It's just happened I was only female, because again, I went to engineering school. So I'm used to hanging around. I was like always one of the guys, so to speak, right? So it was easy for them to come to me with all their ideas. I wasn't like girlfriend type of a friend, you understand? Because mine are very different with a girlfriend type of a friends. I was treated more like one of the guys. So I got to be in a room when no other women were in there, talking about all kind of potential deals and big dreams and, you know, all the stuff that they wanted to do. Matter of fact, I had an occasion where subsequent, I was in Jamaica, and some gentlemen wanted to have a discussion and decided, they said, oh, we're going to make a man move. And then they say, oh, but we want Claire to come. All right, she can be honorary man for the day. But no wife and no girlfriend. No wife, no girlfriend. Just
as I say, breaking glass ceilings, you know, is one part of your personality. The other part is...
So I'm used to being the only female in a room with the guys.
Okay.
Par for the course.
So all being said now, how did the ICS, the Institute of Caribbean Studies, get structured afterwards? And who were your supporters and in that phase? And I say this because I will just let you answer. I won't make many comment. I'll just only question. Okay.
Well, the early founders that I would say, those that I remember, because they were very important. And I can say that if I didn't have them at that time, I don't know what I'd have done. Linwood Jolly he's African American. He's a key person. He's the one that said to me, let's do this.
Yes.
He's the one that found the lawyer. He's the one that split the bill to pay for the lawyer. He's the one that found the space for the first gala. He's the one that found the space for the first event we did in 1994 on the sideline of the World Bank Fund meetings where we had ministers of government come, where Congresswoman Maxine Waters showed up and my face was on a picture in the newspaper in Jamaica. He was very instrumental.
Okay.
As a person, my peer. In terms of the adults who supported me, I would say that Shirley Nathan Pulliam was one of the people who supported me a lot at that time because, you know, even though I stuttered, she would still invite me to do things. And I caught the eye of Congressman Nfume. He really liked me. He liked the fact that I was an engineer. So he showed up that first year because he liked me.
Yes.
Because I was an engineer. He didn't know many female engineers. At the time, remember, this is like 1981. No, this was 1993. But I had been going around for a long time as one of the few Black women engineers at that time in Washington, D.C. So people kind of knew of me in that way. And so, but with ICS specific, we had Wendell Thomas from Grenada, Ian Edwards from Jamaica, Gabriel Christian from Dominica. These are the ones that I remember as being key. In terms of the woman we had as an early public relations person was Lizelle York. Lizelle York was very good. She had just finished her degree in communications and she had her own vision of what she wanted to become. So ICS became almost like a practice, so then she could use her portfolio from that to apply for jobs.
Okay.
We had another woman who was a vice president, Marcia Johnson, who again, because she was Guyanese, but she saw the potential of ICS. So when they were involved, they really gave it all before they moved on, but they always used their portfolio. So I have written job description, job interview, what do you call it? What the word? Recommendations for a lot of people who have passed through ICS, because those people who really gave it their all, and I know without whom I could never have accomplished certain things, know they can always call on me because they know who they are and they know what they did was instrumental. Publishing a newsletter at the time, of two of us with no funding. Because remember, when I went to some of the people and said, I want to do this, they laughed at me and said it couldn't be done. I was laughed at. It couldn't be done. Oh, you'll never succeed. You can't tell me a St. Jude's High School girl I can't succeed. That is like lighting fire under my, you know what?
At least one of the girls. Which one?
Okay, which one? I don't know. The one that didn't take no for an answer. The one that would get sent to the principal's office.
The one who, when she goes up in front of the mic, the stutter stays in the background.
The one who was sent to the principal's office for always having an opinion contrary to her teachers.
Yes.
That one was fluent. That person was fluent. He went to the office for speaking out against injustice of teachers oppressing us on our ideas. Man, when I got up on my soapbox to talk about injustice, I was fluent. What?
Okay, so having established and getting some publicity now, and being featured and recognized as a change maker, how did funding materialize now for the Institute?
There's no funding for the Institute per se.
Okay.
We've gotten very few grants over the years. We have one fundraiser every year, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But again, because I had a full-time job, I've always had a full-time job, right, at the IDB. People thought ICS was my job, but it was never my job. I have a full-time job. I don't have any children, so ICS became my child.
Okay. Now, the support from the Caribbean community, well, it expressed itself through the persons you mentioned, and that set I regard that as the pilot project for others, therefore, to follow. Now, in essence, as a 501c3 organization,
yes,
the Caribbean community has blossomed with 501c3 organizations.
No, well, let me just say, we have always had 501c3s, even before I got here. But
Yes.
those were national organizations.
Right.
Or they were social organizations.
Right.
We were very different. We were not, ISIS is not an association. It's not a club. It's not set up for people to come and play dominoes. I'm not that we don't play dominoes, because again, I love theater and entertainment, so I would do that too. But we were never set up as a standard club. We were set up to be a think tank the way Washington works. Washington policy space is bent on, you have lobbyists who are paid advocates. Then you have citizen advocate groups like ours, right? That most of them are also funded by their people. So whether it's Arab American or Pacific American, etc., or Hispanic American, their communities fund them very seriously to do the work. We don't have a community that thinks like that. So I've never had a constant stream of funding from, let's say, 20 Caribbean businesses where every year I can count on $10,000 so I can hire a staff. That's why we've never had a full-time staff. We've had dribs and drabs of people sometimes coming in, and I will out of pocket pay here and there. A couple of years ago, we got some funding, somebody raised to do some work on energy, but that was a project specific grant. As public grant, maybe to do like a festival for DC government, but not funding to pay staff. Our community doesn't understand that model. So we've never had the benefit of any wealthy Jamaicans, wealthy Caribbean Guyanese giving us a pledge that every year I'm going to put $10,000, $20,000 into your pocket. So this is why we've never been able to reach a certain level of influence. When people talk about, okay, the vice president doesn't pay us in the mind, why should she? We're not ready for that level because we ourselves haven't organized to take advantage of even the seeds that I have planted by supporting this little tree here that's been standing on very stony ground by virtue of the fact that I'm just a very stubborn person. I refuse to quit and go away.
And I'm glad you got as deep as that, because that's what I needed, you know. On SosoBone, you know, we cut the fat, you know that, and we get down to the bone. All
But
right.
this is the bone. The fact
Yes,
is that,
you know,
if I mean, and honestly, people have said to me, come back and said to me directly, oh, they're not coming to my event because they don't want to help me to buy my Mercedes Benz. Let me just state that if you work at an international organization, such as the IDB or the World Bank, and you're not even secretaries at those things, you're fairly well compensated in the market.
Right.
So I never needed to do anything to make extra money. The reason why they compensate you is because they don't want you stealing from them, because you're working with governments.
Yes.
So I have never felt the need to sort of see ISIS as a fundraiser for me. I saw it more as my child, my contribution. Since I wasn't going to go home and go into politics, then I would do this instead.
Right.
And so it became a space for those activities, and especially when now at the bank, I also had to deal with the reality that I was going to become the champion for Black people in Latin America who had no voice and become the voice of the voiceless, as God called me to do. Then I had to have a vehicle by which I could do stuff outside the institution to give these Black communities another opportunity to be able to have access things.
And you see, I had a conversation with a gentleman about 8 or 9 weeks ago, town hall meeting setting. And, you know, we reach a point where, while we never identified the actions as sacrifice, but I had to say that when you take on a leadership role, then you find that you are making sacrifices.
Of course, you're making sacrifices.
When you take on a management role, you're not really making sacrifices. But when you take on a leadership role, then you're making sacrifices. As a matter of fact, I had to say to the gentleman, I say, as a matter of fact, you know, you remember the story of Jesus. He made sacrifices, spear in his side and nails in his hands. Okay? So this is what our 501c3s that are at a different level need to understand that there's a difference between sacrificing and management, or between leadership and management. Okay, leadership is an idea that spreads. Management is structural, compartmentalized, in an area. And I say this because it is important that we look at what has gone before us. And even as we go about looking to create something or to not create, to duplicate something, we can actually look at where it's coming from. Because if you, as I said, if you know where you're coming from, then probably you might know where you're going. Even the GPS is going to tell you that if it cannot find your location, it's going to tell you to stay right there. No, no contact. Okay. And so I'm saying this because I recognize the Institute of Caribbean Studies as playing a leadership role. That's why I went through all that trouble. Not a management role. You're not managing our community.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Who can manage the Caribbean community?
Okay. You're not managing your community. You are leading our community. Because even as I asked about the financing, I have asked the question on more than one occasion publicly on my radio program. How does CARICOM recognize the vital role that the Institute of Caribbean Studies is playing for our community?
They don't recognize it. And the fact is, the first time at CARICOM, remember as I said, I worked at the IDB, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because I worked at the IDB, I had access to prime ministers and a lot of people that regular people wouldn't have had access to.
Mm-hmm.
And because I also was able to get some projects approved that had been lying in, let's say, the dust for a long time. For example,
Mm-hmm.
I can talk about this now because it's many years ago, but there was a project for the Eastern Caribbean region at Sir George Lane. The reason why he joined my board as an advisor, right? The advisory board, was because when I started, I realized in order to get to be taken seriously, I had to have certain brand names on the masthead. So Sir George, that sounds good, Sir George, right?
Oh, yes.
He was then the head of PAHO. So of course I reached out to him, and I'm glad he wasn't afraid of it. He said yes, because why? When he had been trying to get a project done in the IDB, it had lied. Nobody wanted to take it down because Caribbean, whatever. But of course, I'm young. I need to find things to do. They're trying to not give me things to do. So I pick up the stuff that nobody else wants to do because, again, God gave me a very creative brain. Thank you, God, for that. And I went out and found the funding to get it done.
Right.
And he knew how long it had been there doing nothing until I took it up. And he was very appreciative. And that's why he was willing to put his name on the masthead of this tests organization that had never been tried before. Nothing like this had been tried before. CAIO existed before, but CAIO had the Caribbean American Intercultural Organization. I was a member of CAIO. I used to organize the art shows in the mayor's office back in the day. I used to perform for CAIO, but it was not meant to be a think tank that would focus on policy. And he saw action, not a bag of mouth. Right, exactly. I delivered, right? And because he also worked in the environment of the wash, he understood what it probably took for me to wiggle and wind my way through the different traps that would have been set. Oh, yes. To get something to be approved. So it is, I mean, people see something and they just see what looks like the glamour of something. But there's a lot of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears goes into even I would say the few achievements that ICS have had. Because they're not many, they're few, but they're big. They might be few, but they're big. You see? Right? Many are called, but few are chosen. That's okay. No. One of the things I want our listeners to understand, because sometimes we need to understand why our Caribbean governments sometimes do not respond in a certain way, is because they mix up the ability of their embassies
and their consulates to do things in Washington versus the ability of an organization like ICS.
Well, that's true. And the fact is that I think the diaspora still remains highly untapped.
Mhm.
And the reason why we're not more powerful is because we don't work together collaboratively.
Mhm.
But the government don't really understand how Washington works. As I said, we have this three-legged stool, right?
Yeah.
The lobbyists have the money, but the people like me, we presume to have the votes.
Yes.
So remember that at the end of the day, Washington, D.C. is operating in a space where they're used to people coming to argue for what they want, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Now, some of our constituents have highly Caribbean districts, or they have a company, or they have a cruise shipping company, therefore they might be interested because that company goes to the region, or they might be bringing in rice from Ghana or whatever. So there's different reasons why a particular congressperson might have an interest in the region, even if they don't have a large constituents from the region, right?
Mhm.
It is our job to understand that.
Uh-huh.
Because most of us are volunteers, all of us are volunteers, most people don't have the time, or most people are also afraid. They're afraid that if they were to start being an advocate, they could get into trouble, number one.
Uh-huh.
Or they feel like they don't want to get involved in politics because then it's not their country. And so there are very few people in the Caribbean diaspora movement, and I'm talking about this Jamaican, Antigua, and Trinidad, and whatever, that really get involved in policy. Very few, right? And so that's a big opportunity lost. Then there are those who have decided to get into policy because they saw me do it and thought, okay, they're gonna get famous, they're gonna get money from CARICOM, huh? And then they're gonna, somehow show me that I'm really just like I'm just like a waste of time and I'm not all that. They don't normally last more than a year because really there's no money to be made. There's no money to be made.
Let me tell you something. I mentioned earlier this gentleman I spoke to, and I mentioned the word sacrifice, and he says, "Who would do that?" And I said to him, "A patriot. A patriot will do that." He was silent for longer than he has ever been silent in 6 months.
But I can tell you this. I mean, maybe if I had children, I wouldn't have done it, right? But I didn't. So I had the benefit of saying, well, what's the point? I mean, there's only so many shoes you can buy.
Mm-hmm.
I again, remember, I grew up believing from St. Jude's High School that, again, drinking the Kool-Aid of the National Pledge, Jamaica can do her part to serve the whole human race. That's a pledge we said every day.
Yes.
I truly drank the Kool-Aid. It wasn't like, oh, just something. And then you grew up in a high school where Mrs. Carnegie, the principal, would say to us girls, you girls are going to be leaders of Jamaica in the future. How could I then just leave and do nothing? If I'm not going to go back home, then I need to stay here and do what I can do from here.
And Dr. Nelson, one of my observations, in looking at the times when we have events by organizations and they sing the national anthem, on many occasions I wish that they would just repeat the pledge, because the anthem is a prayer. And typically when we pray, we're asking for things. We're not really planning to give anything. Okay. Okay.
But that's true too.
Okay.
That's true too.
Yes. So I am saying, if we would just, at that time when we have our gatherings together, just recite the pledge.
Well, I have to tell you that I did the pledge when I spoke the last time. I did the Independence Ball for the people in Delaware, run by Lorraine Badley, and I did repeat the pledge.
Yes.
Whenever I speak to Jamaican groups, I repeat the pledge. But I can tell you one more thing. At the UN Summit of the Future last week, I repeated the pledge.
Okay, and again,
I was in the consulate of Jamaica. There were not many Jamaicans in the room, mostly foreigners, but I wanted to explain to them why Jamaica plays in a different weight class than our actual weight. We're heavyweights in a featherweight class. Does that make sense to you?
Of course.
We're featherweights, right?
And
But we're heavyweights. And the reason why I repeat the pledge, because I wanted to explain to them why Jamaica. So I repeated the pledge. I closed my event last week by repeating the pledge.
And again, that's the difference between leadership and management. In leadership, you break barriers, you're looking for new ways to expand the experience of your people, or of your audience, or of your, of your country. Okay? So, and I want our listeners to understand that, because sometimes we intermingle them, okay? Or people claim that they're a leader when they have not done anything. They just, someone elects them to be president and they start telling that they're the leader. And they have not accomplished anything. Okay? So I'm saying this specifically because of my admiration and my respect for the Institute of Caribbean Studies, okay?
Well, thank you for that. I can say definitely, and I'm looking back from a career perspective at the Inter-American Development Bank, it was critical to have ICS because once I decided to take up the mantle of the voices Black people in Latin America, it was a whole different ball game.
Yes.
I mean, when you go to a place to become an engineer, you are denied the opportunity to become the best engineer you can be because, you don't look like what they think an engineer should look like. And then God says to you, over here, these people need help. So once I recognized that there was a whole bunch of people who looked like me in Latin America who needed my voice, I never, ever, ever missed going back home ever again, because the first event I had in my house where I had a Colombian, a Black Peruvian lawyer, and an Uruguayan activist. And I invited the Caribbean ambassadors from the OAS to come and meet them to begin to push the agenda. I wept because I woke up, I said, this is what Garvey was trying to do. And I realized in that moment that I was a Garveyite.
Ah, you see?
It was a transformational moment. Having those three gentlemen, it was when was it? I think it was 1993. So everything happened in 1993. ICS was founded in 93. I started the Black movement at IDB in 1993. Everything, the first Black event I did for Black History Month in the IDB was 1993.
And I'm going to say this very clearly, and understand me. Those two characters that you have became merged in 1993.
Probably. Because I went on then to do the first ever study on Black people in Latin America ever by an international organization. That was transformative.
The stone that the builders rejected became the cornerstone.
Yeah, but trust me, again, it was very much an undercover project. I had at the time, God worked it out. I had a supervisor who really was a genuine person. He gave everybody a chance. He said to me, people have told me terrible things about you, but that's okay. I'm going to take you as I see you. What do you want to do? And I told him what I want to do.
Okay.
And he said, Clarita, is Spanish. Clarita, you can't put Black on the title. Take it off. Put poverty alleviation for minority communities. And then he said, and I will get the money. I'll get it passed for you.
Okay. And Dr. Nelson, thank you very much.
From Chile, a gentleman from Chile. Juan Manuel Farina, can never forget him because he was one of the people who I loved, who treated me with respect as a Black woman. And he gave me what I needed to get the work of the Black community started. And I would always honor him for that.
Okay. And this, Dr. Nelson, is part one where we're going to stop. Next time we pick up, we're going to pick up right where we left off. So again, you're tuned into SosoBone Media Network. My guest is none other than the indomitable Dr. Claire Nelson. So Stay tuned for part 2. Thank you so much for tuning in.